Grandma screamed as the Gribbies made sawdust of her calves, tibias, and fibulas. She tossed the infant over the chasm, and Yumford caught it by the ankle. The swirling clouds of glossy black insects circled her legs, grinding up the nightgown in a wet sawmill buzz. The old woman rattled and ripped down to her knees, her hips, her ribs, like a full number 2 pencil sharpened to a blood stub. "Christmatina!" Stevia reached for the woman, but Yumford pulled her back with a taut, vein-throbbing arm. "She's gone, Stevia! Just like old man Brinson, the Tungsten Twins, Mayor McRuff, and the diners of the Lucky Glove Grill." He gently laid the baby in a duffel and slung it over his shoulder. "Schoolmarm Hoggard, the Bluetooth teen, Stearns, Whipple, Miss John's Knobs, Little Tondrake, and Big Mr. Tuggs, all of Barksville, gone to these Gribbies!" He fell to his knees, grinding his mitts in the blood-misted pebbles of the parking lot. "And yet, I survived with a past like mine. Why?" Stevia laid a hand on his shoulder. Her touch unlocked his tense muscles. Maybe you found something to live for. Or maybe someone." Stevia blushed before the intensity of his gaze. Maybe it's time you start saying all those things you should have said when you first drifted onto my farm. Maybe I had to earn it. Maybe, Stevia whispered. She inched closer to Yumford, lips parting. Maybe. "Yumford, Stevia!" The shout came from up the steps at the entrance of the Barksville Public Library. "Gadsookies, you're alive!" The two pulled away. Laughter bowed Stevia over at the sight of her ornery old neighbor. "Mr. Crimmins! I thought I'd never see you again." "You think I missed this party?" he said, patting his red-splattered tummy. Stevia gasped as the widow Sporads appeared at his elbow. "Mrs. Sporads, I thought the Gribbs got you in the Barksville Mall food court." "Not all of me." She raised a bandaged arm, missing the hand. "And now nothing is gonna keep this old gal from killing some Gribbies. Patoo!" She spat on the ground. "Come inside before the next wave." Survivors of the town huddled and shivered in the library's entry hall. The Tickman quadruplets tended to the now armless mailman Sudrip. Paris the boy wept with Hollywood Mike. The visiting Catsdale Community College women's billiards team bickered, lost without their captain. The late mayor's assistant, Pit Pat, lay in old heiress Throat Hog's lap as she pet his thinning hair. Yumford tossed this last pair the duffel bag, then hooked his pinkies in his mouth and whistled shrill. "People of Barksville, hear me now. There's an ocean of Gribbies out there rising up the steps, and in 15 minutes, it's gonna be at our ankles. And after that, I don't know. But you know what I do know?" He looked out at the crowd. The baby was sitting up from the duffel, smiling with a full set of teeth. "I know that I don't know. You hear that? I don't know. Used to be I didn't know nothing about no Gribbies. All I knew was my past, my terrible past. Now I know more than I ought to know. No! This can't be the day we say, sorry, Buckster, I don't know enough to fight for my own life. No, I know we know more than we know. No. I know we know more than even we know. No! Everyone broke into a triumphant cheer. When those Gribbies creep up our ankles and ask in a wretched hiss, can I eat your flesh? Do we say, sure? No. We say, no. As a chant began, poor Reverend Tibbs heard what he thought was a cat scratching at the door, the one he lost when the Gribbs took the chapel. Michael? Is that you, girl? The holy man knelt down to look out the glass. The window shattered. Gribbies sprayed over the man as though bursting from a pipe. By the time he spun around to face the Barksville citizens, his face was gone, bare mandibles stretching wider and wider in horror until they ripped apart. Screams echoed in cacophony. The survivors fell back, aghast, clawing the floor to get away. Yumford watched the tide sweep over a display of YA novels by Southeast Asian authors, then roar over a selection of DVDs labeled Girl Dinner. Up the stairs, he shouted, to the rare books repository. Stevia tried to pull Eris Throathog and Pit-Pat from a wave of hissing Gribbs, but the bugs caught Pit-Pat by the lanyard. The new lovers refused to unclench hands, and so both were pulled into the maw of the chattering wave, reduced to mulch in a grisly, screaming minute. Before the Gribbies could swallow the tot-laden duffel bag, what remained of Pit-Pat's left arm threw it to Stevia. Like a basketball bouncing on the rim, the toothy infant spilled free from the duffel, hit one of Stevia's palms, then the other, dancing between fingers. She grunted. Just before the baby tumbled headfirst into a pool of bugs, Stevia caught the babe's sole adornment, a diaper. At the same time, Gribbs pierced pincers into the booty, a diaper tug-of-war. Each yanked and yanked until the diaper ripped in twain. The baby tumbled naked and upside down into Stevia's arms. Booyah! She grunted at his buns. The Barksvillians scrambled up the steps. The Catskill Community College women's billiards team swept the approaching Gribbs away with their pool cues. Mailman Sudrup wailed as he lost a foot in addition to his arms. Everyone raced inside the glass-walled rare books repository, with Stevia and the baby last to arrive. That's it? Asked Yumford. What about Paris the boy? Stevia shook her head. Pit-Pat, Dr. Chest, Paula Hammerrock, the Tickman quadruplets. Now it's just Tickman Tim, wept Tickman Tim. Yumford crumpled to the floor, head spinning. As it spun, he noticed the layout of the rare books repository. There was no exit save the one they barred. He had led the survivors to certain death. My terrible past. This is what I deserve. Stevia knelt beside him, the baby in her arms, grinding its teeth. Nothing you did could earn you this. I invented Gribbies. Stevia dropped the baby. It did not mind and began to crawl to the barricade. It was supposed to be a senior prank. Termites in the teacher's lounge. His eyes settled on a point beyond the walls. I thought they'd chew up the tables. No, it was the teachers they chewed. Something about the toxicology of a high school teacher's blood changed them. That mix of nicotine and Claritin, it made them stronger, intelligenter, hungerer. So that's why, that night in the farmhouse, you wouldn't tell me where you came from. Because then I'd know you were from Pooch Town. Stevia flinched at the name. Everyone knew about Pooch Town, how the government burned the town down. They said it was a blimp crash, but the fire couldn't destroy the exoskeletons. Yumford, I would have understood. You could have told me. Yumford's hands masked his sobbing face. I didn't bring the Gribbies. It was the mayor and his downtown revitalization. We heard them at the Lucky Glove Grill. I know, Yumford. She swept a loose ponytail hair behind his ear. I could never blame you. Well, he said, their faces coming closer. There was one other thing I wanted to tell you that night in the farmhouse. The cows mooing beneath our cheeks, hay wet and prickly on our tummies. I wanted to say that I love. Eyes closed, Yumford pressed his lips to Stevia's. They met only air. As he opened his eyes, he saw Stevia had turned in mute shock to face the glass. Behind the benches and overturned bookcases, Gribbies blotted out all light through the windows, roiling like a violent sea on the other side of glass. The baby was the closest, nude as a cherub, reaching a hand to the bowing door. Baby, no! Stevia howled as the door split open, a spray of Gribbies covering the tot in a wriggling cloud. She screamed in agony, unable to watch the insects make blood dust of the tot. Yumford alone could not look away. It was his duty to witness. As such, he was the first to see the miracle. Stevia, look. No, I can't. Look. His calloused hands directed her gaze to the tot, and she joined his amazement. The Gribs had swarmed all over the baby, and yet it was completely unharmed. Giggling, teeth gleaming in an unblemished birthday suit. How? She inhaled. Before he could even answer, Yumford was on his feet, unbuttoning his shirt in a wild fury, whipping off his belt and dropping trow. Yumford, goodness! Widow Sporats averted her eyes. It's nudity, he shouted. They have teacher blood in them. They're prudes. Everybody, denude! The Gribbies fell upon him just as he ripped off his tank top. Stevia clawed fingers into her own screaming mouth at the sight. Tickman Tim shed a single tear. The wave whirred around until there was no sight of Yumford. Until, like a baseball player emerging from a cornfield, Yumford stepped free of the wall of biting Gribbies, nude but unscathed, holding the gleaming toothed infant. "I love you," he told Stevia as he stepped forward. Stevia needed no convincing. She ripped her clothes free in a single party trick swipe and turned to the other survivors. "He's right, everybody! Denude! Denude! Denude!" Old Man Crimmins helped the widow Sporads uncinch her girdle, while Yumford helped Mailman Sudrip remove his sock. In seconds, the survivors were all nude. The Gribbies swept over them in a bug splash. Screams resounded, but were cut short. Swirling within the bug storm, each Barksville resident looked at one another in awe. They were unscathed. Together, they stared up into the central vortex of the bug tornado and saw the secret whirling geometries hidden inside, each pardoned by their proud unclothedness. As soon as the Gribbs arrived, they were gone. Where once was grinding, clicking, and biting, now there was only silence. And then, laughter. First, Yumford laughed, a laugh that shook his ponytail like a pendulum. Then, Stevia laughed as Yumford swept her into his arms. "Do you love me too?" Stevia blushed with her whole body, as noted by the Catsdale Community College women's billiards team. "I love you to a billion, to a gazillion." The two of them kissed, and then it was everyone else who laughed, then applauded, then puckered their mouths into a reverberating "aww." Yumford and Stevia's mouths twisted in each other, pushing harder and harder. The mood spread. Widow Sporads and Mr. Crimmins wrangled their nude bodies against each other and smashed teeth. Mailman Sudrip and Tickman Tim shared a timid smooch, then a wet snog, until they were mouthicating hot and sweaty. The women's billiards team paired off for oralingus, leaving one billiardeer remaining, who began furiously kissing her own wrist. Not everyone kissed, but the nudity helped a few others who would normally be too shy to grind lips with a fresh 18 or older friend. Yumford and Stevia kissed so hard now their teeth chipped. Powder clapped out with each new attack. Stevia pressed not just her mouth, but her whole face into Yumford's, so their eyes were kissing, each nostril, pimple, and pore. Crick! The billiards team stopped their kissing to scream. Yumford and Stevia's skulls were fusing together. Eyes splayed out to the sides from the force, steaming blood from their ears. Their hands melted into each other's backs, pulling the union closer and closer. The heads fully merged into a giant, hairy sphere, the spinal columns whipping about it like tails on a mutant sperm. Mailman Sudrip undid his kiss from Tickman Tim long enough to see the monster of loving union rear up on 4 hind legs. The widow and Crimmins were not so lucky. The kissing fervor spread to them next. Mid-embrace, their cheeks melted against one another. The heads fused side by side, mandibles forming a twisting S of teeth. The Yumford Stevia beast of 2 backs took prompt notice of the new amalgamation. In seconds, the chimeras became a mouthivore of 4 spines, 8 legs, and a spinning Ouroboros of 4 human lips. "Run for it!" screamed Tickman Tim, the new male lead of the story. The Yumfer Stevie Porrick beast lunged for him, but he dodged, sending it toppling into a bookshelf of Ronald Reagan's correspondences and magazines. The human millipede fell through a wall. The survivors fled. Free from one torment, Barksville had found another. A month passed. Tickman Tim carried the nude infant, nude himself, leading a pack of nude billiards players and clothesless locals. They came upon a pack of still clothed survivors, bunker holdouts from the last Gribby wave. A man and a woman, both classically handsome and clasping hands, stepped forward to represent the group. "You gotta get out of here," the woman said, a yearning in her voice. "The Gribbies are coming for... Where are your clothes?" Tickman Tim ignored them and spoke to the rest of the group. "Nix the clothes. We got bigger problems than Gribbies." He inspected the clasped hands of the group leaders. "You two don't have romantic tension, do you?" The way their eyes connected for a beat, then parted, was all the confirmation he needed. "I can't take any chances." He shot the man in the chest with a crossbow. The handsome man spewed as the bolt sent him sputtering to his back. Veronica fell to her knees at his side. "Grandpat, you can't die. I never told you my full backstory." "Heh," he said, cradling her blood-soaked hand to his chin. "With cheekbones like that, you never needed to." Tickman Tim was furious. They were still flirting. If the love beast sensed the romantic tension, he started to reload the crossbow when Yumfer Stevia Porred Crimmins ripped through a nearby preschool. It roared in surround sound from the dozen mouths of absorbed lovers, polka-dotting its spiraling length. Though yards away, the howl set the 2 lovers of the new group quivering. "What's happening, Veronica? I don't know." Their skin began to bubble and fuse. The joined hands of the new lovers became conjoined hands. The bones rearranged so their swollen hand mass looked like a flesh beetle with 10 legs of fingers. The man and woman began to warble moan in a unified voice. Grinpat pulled his other limbs to his chest in cannonball fashion and dropped to the ground with a thud. Linked by the length of their conjoined arms, Veronica whipped him about like a meaty mace. "Gadzookies!" shouted Tickman Tim as he made a break for it. He was too late. Grinpat's broadside cracked against Tickman Tim's fleeing skull. Tim dropped the toothy infant as the new lovers absorbed him into their union. The trio then walked backward into Yumfer Stevia Porrat Crimmins, not unlike a baseball player receding into a cornfield. The infant cried for but a second, then mustered his willpower and learned to walk that very second. Hard times make tough toothy babes, too tough to cry, and too rough to die. His name was Teeth. And now he is the main character of the story. The year was 2444. Downtown Barksville was a crater. The Barksville Library was a heap of rubble, and the Barksville heap of rubble was now a loose, gritty powder. The 5 surviving humans lived underground, beneath the Lucky Glove Grill, where they thought the love beast could not find them. Teeth was 18 years old, the last baby ever born in Barksville, and its only hope. Teeth had lived a life void of all romantic tension. He did not flirt, did not share candid personal details with his fellow survivors, did not connect eyes across any distance. This was not difficult for him. His mouth was a corncob of teeth. He barely had room to talk, let alone kiss. It was the other survivors he worried about. "You're shivering," the athletic Chernup said, inches from Beckonie's trembling lips. "Take my blanket." He draped it over her, but let his arms linger until they too shivered. "Maybe we could share it," Beckonie said, pouting her lips. "Trishat, you know how you scratched on the final game of the Catstail Billiards Classic?" Fresca told her longtime billiards rival, her once sworn enemy, really her complete opposite in so many ways that it would seem impossible that 2 billiards players so dissimilar could ever bridge their differences. "You didn't. Not really. I chalked the cue ball." Trishat, now a leathery old woman, gawked at her aged companion. "Why? It cost us the tournament. You said it was the most important billiards game of our lives." "If you won, you would have been out of my life, onto the circuit, playing against big names like Fast Stick Stanley and Fat Duck Danny. I couldn't lose you." "Lose me? You hated me." "Or did I?" As both couples brought their faces closer and closer, Teeth was on his feet. He spat between teeth as the flesh of the flirting survivors began to pulse. The cave ceiling rumbled, stalactites falling, dust clouding the air. A conjoined chorus of mouths shrieked through a tear in the crumbling cavern above, and Yumfer Stevia Porad Crimmins Grinpamaronica Tickman dangled a mound of flesh through the aperture. Except now the beast was much more than those first 7 souls, but the combined flesh of all of Barksville. Teeth watched as the 4 other survivors united, melted in love. The group-hugged flesh of the townsfolk reached out like amoeba pseudopods from the ceiling and beckoned their congealing forms unto itself. Hypnotized, the unionizing couples each crab-walked into the flesh chambers like players of baseball receding into fields of corn. Now, the entire loving mass dripped slow from the ceiling, a bulging taffy of general fornication, a hot, slow-motion puddle of love molasses that filled every remaining space until it was all Teeth could see. The remaining Barksvillian gulped with difficulty because of all his teeth. He had imagined his fate many times, but to live it presently robbed him of all plans, dignity, and urine. He shook his head, tried to run, climb, but there was not an inch around him into which to flee. The beast was a mountain. Despite the Gribby thinning, the survivors had been in the hundreds. Having one by one absorbed each, the love pile was now so thick, the lovers at the center were compressed to molten human liquid. With another few towns absorbed, the atoms at the nexus of Yumford and Stevia's kiss could copulate into new elements too spicy for any periodic table. For 18 years, Teeth was certain his sheer number of molars would deny him romance. Yet, staring at the living pile of Barksville, he knew he was wrong. Sudden longing overwhelmed him, longing for a skin hill. As powerful as one human falling in love with another can be, Teeth felt it a whole town's worth more. This was a thousandfold love, a giant squelching tumor of love, a rolling human rat king of love. The beast was never a beast. In its flank, Teeth saw the faces of all those he lost. Tummy Ache Todd, Go for Greg, Pointer, Pricker, and Slow Jack Nostrand, the Soda Shop Kid, the Library Adult, Slinker the Adolescent, Dr. Hamsnap, Professor Eagerhorn, Ronaldo Footloose DDS, Portishead, and the Pediatrician's Apprentice, Turtle T. Sarah's, and Sarah Turtles Thomas. At once, Teeth forgot why he ran for so long, why he hid and starved and feared. The stench of 1,000 mouths was a perfume sweet. The uneven blinking of 1,000 eyes was a secret code to unknown pleasure. Teeth was grateful he was naked. Nothing stood between him and the dense bundle of his every neighbor. He cooed. Teeth's skin rippled, his spine undulated, and his organs untethered. Each cell of his body heeded a new call, dissociated, and found homes among their new master. The last child ever born in Barksville became the final piece of a new being. Barksville had become God. Because that is what happens when a whole town loves itself to putty. A god is born. And yes, it's the only way it happens. The shoppers of downtown Houndsburg are nowhere to be seen. The TVs in the display at Victorious Chin's Electronics play to empty sidewalks. News bulletins of frowning anchors, countdown clocks, B-roll of crying families, aerial footage of the determined Flesh County. The wealthiest leave the continent. The poorest lock their doors. They wait for Barksville to come and love them forever. Because Barksville, like all gods, is love. Sticky, sticky love.